In order to build wealth, you might have to leave the country. At least that's what our friend Andrew says. At Wealth Nation, in this video today, we aren't just going to talk about life insurance. Let's talk about citizenship insurance, shall we?
More people around the world realize that and are going elsewhere. More people around the world are realizing that and staying in their own countries if they have money because they're seeing more opportunities.
You coined the phrase, go where you're treated best. How has that evolved over the years for you? Or what does that mean?
Go where you're treated best, and thank you for having me, means that you shouldn't settle for things based on where you're born. My father unwittingly said those 5 magic words, as I called them, back when I was 12 or 13 years old. And he told me, he said, listen, the direction of our country, the United States, is changing. And he was very prescient in this regard. He predicted a lot of what's happening right now. And he said, don't think you have to stay here in the same city or in the same state as many of your friends have been told they have to because they have to take care of their parents. He said, listen, we're going to take care of ourselves. You take care of yourself. And you, as a young aspiring entrepreneur, are probably going to find when you reach adulthood better places to do business. Asia's coming up. This is back in the 90s. Other places may be coming up. You forget staying in the same city or state. You don't even have to stay in the same country, he said. You should go where you're treated best. And it was a permission slip that I think a lot of people, certainly around, where I grew up in Cleveland, Ohio, rather traditional place, everybody figured, hey, when my parents turn 65, I'm going to take care of them. And my parents said, listen, it's not our children's job to take care of us. It's our job to prepare. My dad was in the financial business and dealt with insurance and that kind of stuff. He said, listen, we'll take care of ourselves. Our kids should live for themselves. And he really thought that the U.S. would head in the wrong direction. And if you look at the economic freedom rankings, if you look at the peace rankings, if you look at so many of the indices that are out there now, I mean, the U.S. has been getting worse and worse. The year I was born, The Economist labeled the U.S. the best place to be born, 1984. And you could probably agree with that. It probably was one of the best places to be born alongside West Germany. Not so true anymore. In fact, where I'm sitting right now in Malaysia scores pretty closely to where the U.S. scores. They don't do that study so often anymore, but when they do, Malaysia scores pretty closely. So my father spoke to, that's what's going to happen. And he was looking at Chile and he was looking at New Zealand before a lot of other people were.
That's awesome.
Thank you for sharing that. And the cheeky, question that I kind of have for you is like, the United States is the best country on earth. And you just addressed that, right? Sarcasm, right? It's the best country on earth. Why would somebody like yourself just want to renounce their citizenship and say, peace out, I can figure something else out?
Well, the average person doesn't renounce their citizenship.
Of
I mean, there's estimated to be something like 10 million Americans who live overseas, and it is record numbers, but tens or 4 figures, low 5 figures every year choose to give up their citizenship. Neither of those statistics, of course, they know everybody who's doing that. But most people who move overseas just move overseas. They keep their U.S. citizenship. Maybe they have a dual citizenship that they've earned by living somewhere, or maybe they were born somewhere else, came to the U.S. and now they're going back. I mean, there's all kinds of situations. But no study says the United States is the best. It's not even the number 1 in obesity anymore. It is number 1 in prisoners per capita, beats China. I mean, that's about it. So I think that, listen, I'm all for having emotions and I'm all for feeling a connection. I mean, when I traveled all over Southeast Asia, for example, I felt better here in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, than I did in Bangkok or I did in other places people often move. And so one of my homes around the world is in Kuala Lumpur. And in part, it's because it feels better. Now, I'm all for people saying, I like living in the United States. Now, the difference between they and I is I've traveled to over 100 countries. I've lived in a dozen of them. I have investments. I have homes. I've really digged in. So when I say, hey, Bangkok isn't as nice for me as Kuala Lumpur, I've actually spent, substantial time there. I have friends there. I understand a little bit about the culture. And I'm not just speaking from someone who wants it to be true. People often ask me, isn't it sad what's happening to the United States? Isn't it sad what's happening to a lot of countries in the West that are just going in the wrong direction? I don't look at it that way. And I think that maybe my superpower is not being so nostalgic. I live in the moment. And I really kind of felt reborn when I moved overseas. And whatever happened before that, I don't really look back so much on that. I think that what happens in the world is what happens, and we can choose to be sad about it, or we can choose to accept it. And I think a lot of people right now in the U.S. are struggling. What interests me, germane to what you guys talk about, is how many people who are 60 years old come to my YouTube channel and watch Live Like a King, for example. We do luxury living all over the world. We show Medellin, Colombia, and Oman, and all these places that you wouldn't think you could live like a king. And they say, well, that's great for you with all your money, with you. If you have $1 million, like, well, if your country's the best country in the world and you're 60 years old, that you would have had to put like $200 a month in the S&P 500 to be a millionaire. Either you're just dumb or the country isn't so great. I mean, if you get to say, it just doesn't make sense. So what it is people feel it's great. And they don't even feel it's great. They just feel afraid of the other options. But there's something in particular about the United States. We're at the sushi restaurant last night here in Kuala Lumpur. A friend of mine came in, and we meet some this guy's like 5 bodyguards with him. And he invites us to drink his sake and eat and everything else. And he's talking about Malaysia. Never once do I get the sense he thinks Malaysia is better than any other country. Yeah. He just likes it. But he also likes to go other places. There's something about Americans that the marketing has worked too well, where they think everybody else sucks. And that's, for example, what my Live Like a King series was about, was showing you, hey, you can live very well in places like Malaysia, and you can eat caviar and drink champagne, or you can go to Taco Bell. But let's drop the act.
I love it.
Right. Now, so when it comes to the United States, it reminds me of Plato's allegory, where everybody thinks that it's great because they haven't left. Yeah. It's amazing because of the news that we watch, which is the truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth. So every other country that is exposed to us via TV or the internet is a one-sided thing. But when you go to some place like Medellin, which is amazing, by the way, one of my favorite places in the world. What is your criteria for picking a place to stay? You have a place in Serbia, you're in Kuala Lumpur, you're in Bogota. What's your criteria?
What I partially realized, being 40 and doing self-development work, is partially, I operate to some extent on just how do I feel and what are the feelings. And I think I'm pretty good at ascertaining without necessarily putting numbers on everything. What works. I went to Serbia and just felt there was some really, undervalued property. So I owned an apartment in, I think, the best part of Serbia. Then we bought an office. We used to have a bigger team in Serbia, so we bought an office. And now the office is, close to doubled in value. Serbia is not as fast growing as some places in Asia, but I felt like, okay, regional hub of, former Yugoslavia in, the Western Balkans in Europe. Europe is suffering, certain things. And I just felt a number of factors like this is a place that's more personally free. It's going to go up. Some things that you can look at technically are, tax rates. When I chose to move to Malaysia, I didn't realize they had a pretty friendly tax system. They have a territorial tax system. Now, if you're an American, it's a little bit harder to play with, but let's say you're Canadian, you come here and your company is in Hong Kong. You can theoretically pay zero tax. When your company is, you can pay zero tax in Malaysia. And so tax rates are something. And I think that kind of connects to a feeling of openness. I found that more open feeling places tend to have lower tax rates, tend to have easier immigration. Malaysia is a pretty straightforward country to immigrate to. You put some money in the bank, they want you to move here. Asian countries, if you can deposit your wealth with them, they are mostly interested in allowing you to move there. So I think that's positive. Listen, Trump's coming out not so long ago with this gold card thing for $5 million. Absolutely terrible deal. $5 million to not even get citizenship instantly. Terrible deal in the global marketplace of citizenships as someone who does this. But I respect, for what it's worth, the idea of, hey, we have a commodity, let's be competitive with it. And so I think that the countries that say that are worthwhile. And so there are, legacy brand European countries that everyone thinks, oh, they're high tax, they're over. Italy, Greece, for example. They're not heading in the right direction, but you can move there and pay very low taxes as a foreigner because they realized, you know what, we got to do something to bring some money into this place. Whereas Spain, for example, hasn't been so open to doing that. Germany's heading in the wrong direction. They're not doing that. So, I look at who is saying we need to be competitive as a factor. Where else do you want to choose to live? I mean, you have to feel good. I think there's this misconception that all I do is chase tax rates around the world. We've helped clients move to, close to 36 different tax-friendly countries, whether it's zero in the Cayman Islands, whether it's a territorial system like here, whether it's a lump sum system like in Italy and Greece, where you just pay us $100,000 a year, and that's all, make as much as you want. Whether it's a non-dom system in Ireland, where you only pay on the money you bring into the country. There's lots of ways to get your tax rate to zero or to the single digits. Again, harder if you're an American, but still possible. We help Americans pay 10% less. And I just think there's so many competitive places out there. You want to look at the tax rates. You want to look at going in the right direction. You want to personally feel free. Soft freedom in places like Malaysia is higher. I don't care what's written down in the U.S. Constitution. They don't follow it. So soft freedom and a culture of just leaving people alone is good. And there's lots of choices to pick from in that, but you're probably not going to be picking from a place that was like a name brand. And I think for a lot of Americans in particular, that's a problem. The United States is a brand. It's Coca-Cola, right? They have that Coca-Cola Red, and it continues to thrive, not because it's the best thing to drink, because it has a brand. More people around the world realize that and are going elsewhere. More people around the world are realizing that and staying in their own countries if they have money, because they're seeing more opportunities. But if you're an American, you're probably going to move to a place, if it meets the feelings, the taxes, and the freedom that you haven't heard about.
Mm-hmm. And I couldn't agree more. And what I want to say too, what I feel like what you do such a great job on the Nomad Capitalist YouTube channel is like you literally break it down country by country. And especially the Live Like a King series, I have absolutely loved watching it, because we love Colombia and we've never been to Bogota. And so when we saw the city from your perspective, it was like, damn, we need to go to Bogota. So it was a really phenomenal perspective to just see a different aspect of, like you said, it's not just about taxes. It's not just about this financial game that we're all playing. It's about, exactly like you say, go where you're treated best. How can I live the best quality of life? And pick my geography. And what we notice, especially with a lot of the Wealth Nation clients, many of our clients are able to work more remotely. Many of them are creating new businesses. And, really we've been able to see this shift from them going from the traditional W-2 employee, funding and maxing out your 401k, to now thinking as a business and becoming entrepreneurs. And with the Wealth Nation channel, as you know, we're always talking about own your own lifestyle. And we feel like you I say to the extreme in loving terms, like you have taken that to like the extreme where we're like, man, we didn't even think about geography being something that we need to take into consideration, right? Yeah. Because we've always been focused on these financial tools, and it's like, man, get the hell out of Dodge. Maybe we can do that too. So with that perspective, can you walk us through like the discovery zone of somebody who's just watching this and is like, hey, dual citizenship? Why would dual citizenship even benefit me from a tax perspective, knowing that I'm still technically owing the United States taxes wherever I go?
Yeah, and I think that obviously this is, particularly if you're an American, easiest if you're an entrepreneur who can go anywhere that you want. Now, I would challenge entrepreneurs. We've had clients who, they own a plant or a factory, or they make something. You can still make those businesses more tax efficient while you live overseas. We had one guy, he had 200 employees all around the world, including a number of them in the US and Canada, but they did work all over the world in the mining industry. And so he is the brains and he is the sales force, and his executives could be outside of the country, and they could, lower their taxes, not to zero, but they could lower their taxes. But he had to take the step of saying, after 30 years, I'm no longer going to be in the United States managing these guys. I'm going to be somewhere else. And so I think that, that speaks to, where there's a will, there's a way, is the point. My business, of course, you can run it on a laptop. We've got 100 employees all over the world. It is very remote out of the box. But other businesses can be remote, at least for you. The W-2 employee, that is harder. And a lot of companies, including for tax reasons, don't allow that. So you got to find a way to have your own business of some sort. And that's what activates the US taxes. Dual citizenship, or the tax incentives. Because for Americans, you do pay tax no matter where you go. The deck is stacked against passive income investors. So if you're just in Bitcoin and that's all your wealth, unless you can get yourself to be a professional trader, Your option's mostly Puerto Rico or renounce.
Hmm.
A lot of people don't want to move to Puerto Rico because there's so many better places to go. But if you're an American and you want to keep your citizenship and you have passive income, you don't have that many options.
Yeah.
What dual citizenship allows you to do is, number one, I just think in times of chaos and geopolitical, chaos, having multiple citizenships is good. I would like to be able to go to countries and not have to say I'm an American. I mean, one of my citizenships is in St. Lucia. And people say, well, where are your loyalties going to lie if something bad happens? Yes, the great St. Lucia Kyrgyzstan war that's coming. Oh, how am I which side am I going to take? It's like, that's the very point in my estimation of being St. Lucian. They are competitive. You can go there and give them a sum of money and they will grant you citizenship. They need the money. You're helping actual people build housing and things like that. And it's a country that's not getting into scuffles with people. And so I think that's just good in this kind of time when the world is increasingly becoming multipolar. I don't want to be American if I'm doing business globally. People see our YouTube channel. They don't see the stuff that we do offline, doing business all around the world. And that's the part I want to grow. I'll be much more welcome in a lot of those countries as a St. Lucian than I would be as an American, especially with, some of the Trump tariffs and stuff like that. Whether you like Trump or not, you might be treated worse as an American if you go to do business in Asia. Mm-hmm. And I don't want to be treated worse. I don't think you should be held back by your nationality. So dual citizenship protects you from that. It gives you another place to go if you ever need to. So in the Eastern Caribbean, St. Lucians can live in 6 different countries. If you're a European Union citizen, you can live in pretty much 30 different countries. And so taxes, personal freedom, all that, you've got a lot of choices. But from the tax side, really the way that you would activate the most benefits is by renouncing citizenship, and you want another citizenship to do that. Mm-hmm. I ultimately chose to renounce citizenship. Taxes were way down the list. It really wasn't the driver. I paid 0 taxes as a U.S. citizen for years by structuring my affairs correctly. It's a bit harder now. I think I personally could still pay 0. The average entrepreneur can probably pay somewhere in the high single or low double digits under the new, more complex system. If you choose to live in your second citizenship country, that might make it a little bit easier to access those tax incentives, but that's not a primary goal. Bottom line is, if you're willing to live outside of the United States for anywhere from 9 to 11 months a year, either in another place or other places, as I do, or I have a number of places around the world, you can get your tax rate down potentially to single digits if you move your business overseas, hire yourself as an employee overseas, retain certain earnings. This is not tax advice, but if you do a number of things, you do not have to give your U.S. citizenship to dramatically cut your taxes if you're willing to live outside of the United States. Now, I think there's a lot of benefit in being protected by a second citizenship. Gives you access to travel more places potentially, gives you access to more markets. There's certain advantages. I mean, if you have a South American citizenship, there's certain privileges within South America. I mean, so many examples like that. But for me, if you live overseas long enough and you like it, there's going to come a time when you're going to say, why do I need U.S. citizenship? It's baggage. Now, people who want it, it is. Banks are less open to you. Foreign financial investments are less open to you. You get lower returns on certain things. I mean, there's a lot of people that don't want to do business with you. I asked my banker in Singapore, I said, let me guess, you'd rather have the Indonesian rich guy than the American rich guy. She said, not even close. Because she's a banker. They just want money.
Yeah.
Right.
So the guy in Indonesia comes with no strings. They can sell investments. They can do this. They don't have to report back to Indonesia. They could, the guy has to report his wealth potentially where he lives, but the bank isn't on the hook for being sanctioned by the U.S. government or the Indonesian government in this case. Mm-hmm. So they're like, yeah, we don't want Americans. And guess what? There's plenty of new Indonesians and Vietnamese to come to Singapore, and Chinese give us their wealth. So a lot of people are saying, and this is where the Americans don't get, a lot of institutions around the world are saying, we just don't need Americans' money anymore. They're 4 or 5% of the world's population, and they bring a lot of hassles, and there's a lot of new rich people in our backyard. So from my perspective, one of the best reasons to have a second passport as an American is if you go and live somewhere overseas for long enough, you're going to say, why do I need to be American? I lived in the U.S. And what I've realized is, for me, I follow, I've gotten more in touch with how I feel, as we talked about. Mm-hmm. When I'm stressed, you feel it here. Feel in the chest. Everyone feels it somewhere different. I've really been in touch with how I feel better physically.